Dr. Nandipha Magudumana. After months in custody, she makes a bold bail bid. Find out whether she'll succeed as we take you inside the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court on Monday. Only on eNCA, DSTV Channel 403.
It's D-Day for Nandipha Magudumana's bail bid. She will know on Monday whether she will be released from custody. Dramatic scenes have played out in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court. Magudumana says a convicted murderer and rapist, Thabo Bester, forced her into leaving South Africa with him against her will. But the state is rubbishing this, insisting Magudumana willingly fled the country with her lover. To unpack the very latest developments and Magudumana's bail prospects, we're joined this afternoon by legal experts Elton Hart from the UJ Law Clinic, Mpumelelo, Zikalala, who joins us from our Durban studio, and of course Silindelo Masikane, senior reporter who has been on the case since its very inception. A very good afternoon to you all. And Slee, we're going to start with you because you were there for those particular proceedings. If you could give us a brief update on what exactly transpired before we play a rap piece that you put together.
So, of course, we know that Dr. Nandipha Magudumana has finally launched her bail bid. And over the past 2 weeks, we've heard arguments from the state as well as the defense in terms of why she should be released on bail, and opposition, of course, from the state. But what you're about to watch right now is just some of the investigations that we've done following, of course, what happened with Thabo Bester's escape and how Dr. Nandipha has been implicated. Let's take a watch.
She was born in Bizana in the Eastern Cape and raised in the town of Port Edward. In previous interviews, Dr. Nandipha Magudumana says she wanted to be a doctor from the age of 6. After obtaining a BSc in Health Sciences from Wits University, she went on to study medicine and spent some time in public health care. She then founded her own aesthetics practice in Sandton called Optimum Medical Solutions. A childhood friend says growing up, Magudumana was focused.
She was a well-behaved, focused individual that mainly read books and studied. And it's just a shock as to how this can come about, because we never saw it coming growing up. She was studying, and then obviously she was doing a bit of modeling, and Thabo Bester came about, or she applied or put her portfolio out there, and this is where he snapped her up there and led her in this track astray. And it shocked me seriously, as I had known that she was married and living with a partner. So to find out that she's now involved with supposed convicts, I was startled.
So it's come as a shock that a beautiful, intelligent woman like Dr. Nandipha could be affiliated with a convicted murderer and rapist. According to her brother, Thabo Bester was introduced to the family as a business mentor.
Nancy, explain to me what you understood of the relationship between Nandipha and Bester. Were they colleagues? Were they in a relationship? Were they married?
I never spent a lot of time with her during those times, but as I'm saying that, she did phone me about the Showmax job, getting paid 120,000, and she did phone me about the job, but we never had conversations or things like that. So I carried on thinking he's a mentor, really, TJ.
Okay, so to your understanding, he was introduced as Nandipha's mentor.
As Nandipha's business mentor, yes.
Okay.
And Nandipha came, because we also asked, this money, these cars, this house, turning it new, it was an old house. And then the answer is from Nandipha that she got 700 million rands from ITC. And I found that very hard to believe, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
I found it very hard to believe.
When correctional services confirmed that Bester was alive and well, Dr. Nandipha was nowhere to be found.
Have you been in touch with your daughter by any chance?
No, I don't know even wherever she is.
Has she been in touch with you?
One time she was in touch with me when all this fracas started.
And what did she say to you?
No, she was asking about her mom's health.
Okay.
And she said she's in hiding.
Did she say why she was in hiding? Did she explain to you?
I know why she didn't even need to explain to me. I know what was happening there in Johannesburg.
And are you perhaps worried about her?
Very worried. How can I not be worried about my daughter? I don't want any person to know my whereabouts because I don't trust anybody. It's a very sensitive matter. I've left it to the people to do their investigations and all that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there are people involved from whatever it is, investigators or government and all that. I don't want to disturb, I don't want to talk.
Yeah. Did you perhaps know that your daughter was involved with this man who was in prison?
No.
It's been revealed that the aesthetics doctor lived in this lavish Hyde Park mansion with Bester for 10 months after his escape from the Mangaung prison. It's alleged Zanda Moyo, accused number 9 in the escape saga, assisted Dr. Nandipha to claim Katlego Bereng's body from a government hospital. Bereng's body was planted in Bester's cell in an attempt to fake his own death. According to the police, Dr. Nandipha then pretended to be Bester's customary wife and attempted to cremate Bereng's body. This plan was foiled when Bester's mother intervened.
How to ushwile skamutwadi hauna mtswadi kala hlangwana ke jampa nna ke re hao ngwana o hlokahetse ene no sona le motho a batlang mo pata ha o re ke nke step ke bona rena ke etsa jwa ke pushwa go botho ba bona tsa ba fan shelter time shelter transport o re ke kae ke lo kopa thuso ke be ke thola thuso ga le pone sa la Bloemfontein le nthusa le re ho nna Thabo stop sa ustothi se Orlando moshar le polisa la Bloemfontein le tle mo hape le re lo etsa di DNA test re tsamaye le lona ka tsamaye le lona ra lo etsa di DNA testing thong mafatsana le samwe hona mo mafatsana ba tseba di a ke tse ba di etsa kae mara ke hona mo runeng ga etsa di DNA ha re qeta ho etsa di DNA ka khutla ka tla hae ha khutla ke tla hae le polisa le mama ha never ka lwana di DNA ke go sia hae nna ke ya ke le wana DNA a ya le wana DNA angena kwetelele di DNA di sathu kana go tenne Thabo kana go tenne Thabo ha khudle ha mfili results.
Nandipha, do you know her? Do you know that maybe she was in a relationship?
Indaba ka Nandipha yokuthi Nandipha ushade no Thabo angiyazi Nandipha bengiqala ukumbona uNandipha uvela uThabo makasa kashonile kuthiwa uNandipha umfazi ka Thabo futhi unabantwana bayijuna mina ngithi why all the time bengingavelanga angikhulumi kabi and then bese uThabo ke uNandipha bese ngithi kuyena angifonele ngithi phoyisa lemtrace lemfoni angifonele athi kimi mama ngizoza lapha ngizokutshela le ndaba qala uze kayiwani wafika wangitshela ukuthi bona noThabo bashada abaqeda ukushada baba nabantwana bayi-2 njenena labantwana laba bala ekhaya iyabe iphelele lapho.
And then you found out that she wants to cremate the body, but you were against that.
No, angeke ngivume ngomama nawe ngeke uvume ukuthi umntana kafihle umuntu ongamazi mara uyazi ukuthi umntana anyway yaphila. Uyabona into iqale lapho ukuthi ungavuma kanjani ukuthi umntana noma bathi udopiwe noma kunye uphelele estradini igot makafile uzomdopa lapha umise moshari yakho umfihle. That is problem. And then na hakina anything to do with this. Untata ba ka fela ni ke ipetela setopo sa ngwana ka jwale nna ke tlamele ke blowe ka baka la setopo sa ngwana ka.
Sources revealed to eNCA that on the 11th of January 2023, Bester and Dr. Nandipha fled their Hyde Park mansion to a property they were renting in Coralane. They then realized they need to move to an unknown location. They check into the Hyde Park Southern Sun with the children from the 4th until the 14th of March. On the 15th of March, Bester and Dr. Nandipha moved to a B&B. On the 16th of March, Dr. Nandipha drops her children off at school. The school contacts their father to collect them after she fails to fetch them. The pair then flee the country via the Beitbridge border. Track and trace teams follow them into Bulawayo on the 17th of March. Between the 18th and 19th of March, they drive up to Zambia, moving towards Tanzania. On the 8th of April, the pair are apprehended in Arusha, Tanzania, with a Mozambican accomplice. Sources confirmed that Dr. Nandipha was in possession of 2 passports belonging to an associate, Dr. Mmereka Njani, also known as Dr. Pashi. Dr. Pashi's foundation then released a statement saying it's learned that her identity may have been stolen and it's seeking legal advice. Since her return from Tanzania, Magudumana has been fighting for her freedom. She claims she was abducted by state officials and has attempted to have her arrest and deportation set aside.
Was Dr. Magudumana consenting to a disguised extradition? To whom was the consent made? We're not told. When was the consent made? Was it after Home Affairs exercised the unlawful power under Section 41 of the Immigration Act to arrest her using a South African piece of legislation in a foreign country? We of course know from the principal arguments that provision is of no assistance to Home Affairs, and we also know that the reliance on the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations is of no assistance. We've made those arguments already. So when was consent made? To whom was it made? Under what circumstances was it made? Is it clear? Is it unequivocal? Is it in writing? None of those facts appear in the answering affidavit.
What I do not hear and what I do not understand from this argument's profit is why the applicant is said to have consented to an illegality. On what basis? She wanted to come home, she came home. Doesn't suit her, because when she came home, she was arrested at the airport.
There's a vast difference between disguised extradition and consent.
Very interesting piece that's been put together there by Silindelo Masikane. I mean, Slee, various details that document quite an intricate timeline of what's transpired over the last few months. But what exactly happened in court this past week and the arguments that were put forward by the different legal representatives?
So what we saw this past week were closing arguments from the state as well as Magudumana's lawyers. And what we really saw the state trying to do was to show the court that there is a relationship, an established relationship between Bester as well as Magudumana, and that her claim now that she was actually kidnapped by Bester is absolute rubbish, according to the state, saying that she is ultimately a flight risk if she is going to be released, because she demonstrated, according to the state, that she's able to leave the country without using a passport. What we saw her lawyers trying to do was to show the courts that, in fact, this wasn't a Schedule 5 bail application, saying that the onus was actually on the state to show the court why Magudumana should continue to remain in custody, saying that she has, in essence, shown the court, or met the criteria or the understand it, to be released on bail in terms of the information she's provided in her affidavit. And even though she says that she is reserving her right to remain silent, we now have a better or a clearer idea as to her defense during trial stage, where, of course, she did reveal in that affidavit that she was taken out of the country by Bester, you know, with not of her own free will. So let's just take a snippet, take a listen to a snippet of some of those closing arguments from the state prosecutor as well as Advocate Machini Mutlowing for Magudumana.
What does that have to do with if the applicant in that particular time, she is there saying she was smiling? How does that negate what happened 4 months ago? And in what state of the mind and in what psychological state is the applicant currently? Do we know? I've submitted, Your Worship, that this is a matter that will be dealt with sufficiently during trial.
The investigating officer then raises an issue, Your Worship. He says, if that is the case, why did she not open a criminal case? That question of the investigating officer is answered by Advocate Damedi. What does he say? He says it's the applicant's choice whether to open a case or not. It is her choice. And Mr. McClone don't say it's a choice, says it's her prerogative.
Very interesting there, Elton. We want to bring you into this discussion at this point because those who wouldn't understand the bail application and the different nuances that now have made their way into the court over the last few hearings might be confused as to what exactly is happening. Perhaps break down this bail application process and exactly what it is that has been put forward by her legal representatives.
Now, if you look at bail application, and a lot of people think that bail should be used as a punitive measure. Bail is just a measure that's in place to ensure that an accused person will stand his or her trial. And there's 5 factors that the court will have to look at. Are you going to interfere with witnesses? Are you going to somehow intimidate witnesses? Are you going to evade your trial? They would look at those likelihoods of you committing further crimes. So in terms of Section 60, subsection 4A to E, they set out the criteria there. And you as an applicant, so it's always an applicant, the person asking for bail is the applicant, they then say to the court, listen here, this is the criteria that you set. I am not a person that will commit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I will not do that. Here's my previous convictions, or here's my pending cases, or here is maybe outstanding warrants. This is who I am. I will stand trial, I will not. And on top of that, they will add a tail to it to say that the court can also impose special conditions on them that will stop them from actually breaching the 5 grounds that is set out in Section 60, subsection 4A to E. So that is what the applicant is. So a bail application should be sort of severed from the trial. Yes, you can talk about the merits of your case, but you should stick to as to say, I will stand my trial, I will not interfere with the witnesses, I will not commit further crimes. And more or less that's where you are, and also put mitigating factors before court as to why you are a candidate that should be preferred for bail and not be kept in custody for a prolonged period until your trial has been finalized. That's more or less what a bail inquiry should be engaged with, and not necessarily, and I know people want to hear the merits of this the escape of the century, but we'll get to that point. Now it's just about will they stand trial or not.
Yeah, I want to bring you in then, Mpumelelo, on that point, in that there are various schedules of crimes that are committed, and this is a Schedule 5 application that's been made for bail. And one wonders, we've bandied about very briefly on the Schedule 5 bail application, but in a more detailed form, has her legal representatives done enough on the Schedule 5 bail applications to make sure that she might actually get bail?
Good afternoon to you and also to my learned colleague and also to Silindelo. I think they have, with a bit more work that would have needed to be done at the end of the day. This is why I say so. When it comes to Schedule 5 bail application, yes, the onus is on you as the applicant to say to the court, I'm a perfect candidate to be released on bail. It is in the interest of justice that I be released on bail. I'm going to come back on the date and time in which you have said that I must come back in and be able to stand trial. However, it's unique in this case. We're talking about someone who did not voluntarily bring herself into to be arrested. We're talking about someone who was arrested outside the borders of the country, meaning one can insinuate or maybe say there is a likelihood that if you have the means of getting a fake passport, having the required funds to go outside the borders of South Africa, not to the nearest country, by the way, all the way to Tanzania, then if I let you out on bail, what are the chances that you are going to come back? Yes, there may be preventative measures which are going to be there in terms of a higher bail amount that is there, certain restrictions that you must come and report even on a daily basis at your nearest police station, they can be there. But one would say, in this particular application, if I was a legal practitioner, I was focused on those particular points in terms of saying, I'm not going to say to the court, blind yourself or do not consider the circumstances in which this particular arrest has taken place. I'm going to make sure that I'm able to explain all and allay your fears, because I'm not going to be a candidate which is going to leave this particular country. I have a valid defense. I'm not going to expand on it at this particular stage. However, I'm going to come back when you call on me. That may be one of the factors maybe that could be detrimental tomorrow during the outcome of the bail application.
Just on the points that have been made by Elton and Mpumelelo, you did get a sense that the state was actually a little bit annoyed and frustrated by the arguments that had been put forward, almost wanting to say these are very trivial and it's absolutely untrue. Give us a sense of that atmosphere in court, because it's completely different from the tears and her showing of a rejection of the arguments that were being put before the judge only 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we've seen very dramatic as well as emotional scenes transpiring in this bail application. Like you said, when we were hearing the arguments initially and we were hearing the affidavits from her lawyer as well as the investigating officer, during her particular reading of her affidavit, she was very emotional, always looking down, wiping tears from her face. But as soon as the state came in opposition and read that affidavit that detailed some of the evidence the state believes it has against her, then you could see quite a look of disbelief and shock. But during the closing arguments, because we were possibly expecting a judgment during those closing arguments late in the day, it's just that we happened to start quite late. You could tell that she was quite nervous. She spent most of the time, in fact, with her eyes closed. It looked like she was praying. And I think, of course, the day of the closing arguments being her birthday may have also had something to do with that. She just turned 35 on the 4th of September, and I think what was also a surprise for her, perhaps, or brought some comfort for her, was to see her family in court. Her father, who's accused number 2, Zolile Sekeleni, who's been released on 10,000 rand bail, he came to court with her 2 siblings, her brother and her sister. And they actually brought a birthday cake with them. So I think that may have been somewhat of a comfort for her to have some of her family members in court.
Elton, just back on those proceedings and the frustration you could tell from the state presenting the case, basically saying if she really was forced to leave the country, why on earth didn't she report the matter at that point? What legal standing does the state have in putting that argument forward? But also, is there a situation where perhaps she couldn't report that she'd been taken against her will, or whatever the case may be?
No, it can cut both ways for me. And the thing is, like with a bail application, it's normally you shoot from the hip. So it's a lot of hearsay allegations that's being thrown around because the state will advance things that they've heard from the investigating officer and vice versa. And for me, how she got out of the country, I think in the bail application, she should have most probably ventured into that to put something there for the court to work with, to say, listen, yeah, I did not, because the state put it straight to say, listen, you used illegal means to get out of the country, so you can do it again. So that weighs heavy on the judge, on the magistrate's mind when considering to say, listen, this is a person who's well connected with means, and maybe some finances still somewhere, hiding somewhere, that she can actually quickly skip the country, because she showed us she's done it in the past. The state also said she went out of the country 23 times, although they did not bring documentation, but it's on the record. It's somewhere sitting there at the back of the magistrate's mind, and I don't think a magistrate can just cut themselves off to say, I'm not going to think about that. And that's all the things that one needs to actually look at and actually, but for me, looking at how she presented her case for bail, she has said something, but I don't think she has said enough, so I feel like she won't get bail. She might take it on appeal to the High Court, and maybe they will grant her bail, but I don't think come tomorrow she's going to get bail, although she has sort of half touched somewhere for me on certain things. But as my colleague said, Mpumelelo, I think she was supposed to, there were certain things that she had to actually venture into a little bit more, to just give a little bit more clarity and explanation, so that the court actually understands and actually can get that picture that you were coerced in actually leaving this country, and also that you did not have a chance to actually report at various intersections where you actually encountered law enforcement, because at Beitbridge there's officials there. Yes. Going out of Zimbabwe there's officials there. At some stage you were crossing officials and you did nothing, so that already also should be weighing on the magistrate's mind. You had intersections, and also where in Tanzania when you were taken, you never said to those people you were brought here or kidnapped by Thabo Bester. You kept quiet. So there it was like sort of a safe zone where you could have said something, but you didn't. So for me, that can also maybe work against her, in that she's not taking the court into a confidence to say why at these intersections, when you felt you were kidnapped, you did not say or do anything to alert any of the authorities that you found from here to Arusha.
Yeah, no, I mean, Mpumelelo, I want you to weigh in on that notion that it might get rejected by the judge and she might file for appeal, what that process is likely to look like after the break. We continue with our big discussion. This is Nandipha Magudumana, whose bid for bail continues. We are set to hear that result tomorrow, and we continue the discussion about if she doesn't get it, what are her options, an appeal there being mentioned by Elton. Do stay with us.